radical innovation means have this spirit to adapt whatever idea and to reiterate until you find the right version of it, right? And coping with failure is never easy. And it's not about, being proud or wanting to be right in the first place, but it's simply this maybe humbleness of, saying yourself it's okay, not to get everything right, in the first place, and to consider the failure like the next step, or to consider failure as a reiteration, which is not only a nice marketing formula, but it's also the harsh truth of an entrepreneur.
Two roads diverge in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Thus for the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how we lease on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads and diverge in a wood, and I took the less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Matteo, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Yassin. It's a pleasure to be here.
I chose this poem by Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken, for a specific reason, because for me it seems like you're someone who takes the road less traveled by. There's a word that we can see a lot in the work that you produce, which is rebellious. It's a word that we can find in the title of one of your books, Talents and Rebels. It's also a word that we can find in your newsletter, News from the Rebels Front. I'm actually wondering, what does rebellion mean to you, and how do you aim to embody it in your day-to-day life?
Thank you for the question. In the sense that it is so fundamental that is not often asked, and being a rebel is not to be antagonistic to anything or anyone. It is more a state of mind, okay, and a sort of a mindset in. On one side, sort of not being able to fit any of the boxes that life puts in front of you, be it like a professional box or a family box or an entrepreneurial box, even, right? And on the other hand, be the one who always tries to do things differently, but not for a taken party, not for a or for a caprice, It is really a way to express being unconventional and shake the tree and provoke that friction, whether it is in your personal or professional or whatever entrepreneurial life, that is a healthy friction. And so I wrote this book, which is largely it's an autobiography as well. But then I realized that there are a bunch of people who think like that. So are they a rebel or misfits? I don't know. But certainly they have some traits in common that I try to identify in the book. And some of them build incredible ventures, right? And I think that the history is full of characters that sort of, they constitute a missed opportunity for large corporations or for the ecosystem they thrived. And by the fact that they were against the system or lateral to the system or rebelling themselves to the system, they proved to be right medium to long term, right? Or in some cases, history, like the Kodak example that everyone knows, history proved them right a few years later.
Interesting. Do you think that rebellion is an important trait to nurture for an entrepreneur or an innovator? Would you say that it is mandatory?
So maybe not mandatory, but it's healthy. And there are a few traits of being rebellious, such as, for example, challenging the status quo, that is very useful in any startup building. You know, you and I had a chat in a car about your own startups. And I said, oh, you know, but why don't you do this? And he said, oh, well, we don't do this because we thought this, and this, okay? And this is like a very simple 5-minute conversation where you have a guy that you met for 10 minutes and it's, you know, and this person is inviting you to put yourself in question, and you took the question with open heart and you explain me, you know, why you were acting like this. This is a very simple, like entrepreneurial quality, challenging the status quo, that I think is healthy. And there are other traits of being a rebel that are healthy. For example, you know, being motivated not by, you know, money or success, but by the impact and the passion and how you change the life of the people that work for you or over your clients. You know, I'm not saying that chasing profit as the main objective is not healthy, but I'm saying that entrepreneurs that work for a passion rather than for the money, you know, money eventually comes anyway, but the ones who work with the passion are the one at least I identify myself more with, and I want to hang out more with, rather than the ones that only have, you know, VCs sort of interest at heart.
Absolutely. I mean, you've been involved in the last years in different ecosystems. You've worked in the classic financial ecosystem, then started working in fintech. You've been also involved with startups, entrepreneurs at different levels, and so on. Is there a common ethos or motivation behind the different endeavors that you've been involved in?
For myself, you mean?
Yes.
What drove me, basically.
Exactly.
So, you know, there is a sentence that I think I identify a lot myself with, which is I always choose freedom over comfort. Okay, and that's true also in business. What does it mean? It means that I've never compromised, you know, with anything or anyone as soon as I could. So when I left corporate life 10 years ago, and I started my own journey as an investor, an ecosystem builder, an entrepreneur, you know, wrote in the books that you mentioned, etc., I always try to follow this very basic principle of one, try to be always myself and compromise as little as possible. And by myself, I mean faithful to whatever idea or principle I choose or ethos I choose for myself, you know, which is, you know, always be honest, for example, super important. Sometimes even too much, and diplomacy has never been my best quality, and also like someone very simple and straightforward. Straightforwardness is a very, you know, and I always say that I wear black constantly, not just because I want to be the one who's different or the one who wears black with presidents and ministers and Nobel Prizes, but simply because, you know, quality is, you know, is not given by the brand of the suit you're wearing or the color of your tie, right? And I actually have a very nice anecdote in one of our recent events, which is, you know, we organized this very large event in Africa, and I was actually in this VIP presidential sort of room, and someone came and says, you know, she didn't know I was actually part of the organizers, right? And she said, "Oh, but you're not allowed to be here because your outfit is not appropriate." And my answer was, "It's not my outfit that is not appropriate. It's your mindset that is not appropriate, because I can assure you that with this outfit, I shook, ministers and very distinguished speakers over the past 20 years of careers. And actually, the only reaction I had was, I wish I was wearing sneakers and t-shirts instead of this full-blown suit and tie, because it's also a way for me to travel around the world with just a trolley and being light and being free and not losing time in waiting for luggages at the airport. And being sober. I think that being a sober entrepreneur is also something I identify a lot with. So that's a third maybe character. There will be more, but hey, just these three I think is worth mentioning.
It's also a spirit of rebellion right there, right?
Exactly.
What drives you exactly or specifically to emerging technologies like blockchain and AI and so on?
So we had this conversation this morning because I recently sort of developed this passion for helping African entrepreneurs and upskilling African talents, okay, through different platforms. And so I have a computer science degree. I never wrote a single line of code for work, although I understand technology. At least I think, I like to think that I understand technology. And so there is always this, you can't really fool me when we talk tech, although I'm way more interested in, the business side of it and how the technology impacts, products, lives, the ecosystems themselves. And so you mentioned AI and blockchain. I do believe that the future of finance is decentralized, to start with. Because not only the future of finance, but kind of everything makes much sense to be decentralized. Educations need to be decentralized. I think that today some of the best schools in the world, or the most effective schools in the world, like 01 Edu, or the former or the actual École 42 or School 42, they have no teachers, right? And they have this peer-to-peer learning methodology where you put 2,000 students in a room, they stay there for 2 years, and they enter farmers and they get out coders, and they work with sheep and cows before, and then they go and work for Google 2 years later, right? This is completely decentralized, right? Because there are no teachers. Is gamified peer-to-peer learning. And I want to use this example to, going back into the finance world, which is the one I evolved and I think I know best. And I do believe the only way to get financial services fairer, cheaper, and faster is to decentralize them. From the remittances to, we were talking about the asset tokenization to be able to broaden, the access to property, for example, or the access to asset management, for example. And the only way to do it is get away from the hub and spoke or and I worked for Swift for 13 years, so I know a bit of hub and spoke model. And but back then, 10 years ago when I left, technology wasn't even there. I mean, it was there, right? Because blockchain, back to 30 years ago, when I graduated in computer science, they were called distributed systems, right? Now they brand differently, they got faster, fancier, they got another network, they sparkle up with some stable coin and cryptos, and it became a new world, right? But technically speaking, is not conceptually, is not very different from something that banks have used for years already, right? And I think that now is we are living a very interesting phase of these technologies where they're ready to jump, to leapfrog. And the leapfrog will be, it has been steady, but will soon jump ahead of, if we talk in steps, it will jump ahead in hundreds of meters, right? And in ways that maybe we don't really understand, CBDC is a good example, the fiat tokenization and digitalization of currencies was an acronym until 3 to 4 years ago. Now you have real life example. And I believe there are 70% of the central banks that at least have opened up some sort of consultation to think about it, European Union included. And as I said, like every life-changing technologies, it takes little step and then it progresses extremely fast. We are not yet into the extremely fast. And the moment will come will be the moment where everyone will actually use it without doing it, right? Or they will actually, have part of my assets that are maybe tokenized, and I wouldn't even know it, right? For me, it would be the same that buying, a couple of ETF. In real life, I would be buying a tokenized asset, real estate asset somewhere, very far from where I live, for example.
Yeah, so do you think that blockchain will have its ChatGPT moments at some point? I mean, now the focus is mostly on AI for obvious reasons. A few weeks ago, OpenAI, for instance, have made their announcement of their new model for ChatGPT 4o for Omni, which is able to handle all types of outputs and also inputs. It's also able to have conversations that are almost, if not perfectly, human-like. Now it also seems that the focus is less on technologies like blockchain compared to a few years ago when a lot of people were talking about Web3 and so on. I would personally argue that this is a good thing because now there is less fluff and there are more serious things happening and the technology is also gaining maturity. But I'm also wondering if at some point there will be a massive adoption of technologies that are based on blockchain, as we have seen with the almost overnight adoption of ChatGPT. Although AI has been cooking for a long time, but people recognized its potential once they were able to use it directly and to interact with it.
So I think the difference is that ChatGPT clearly, had an immediate impact of the last meter of people, right? And the last meter, I mean the phone. So like by simply interacting with an app, clearly today you're able to do things that, maybe with the smart use of Google, you could do it before, but today you can do it with 12 years old, right? So it's become so easy, much easier. Blockchain is an infrastructure, so it's not the last meter. Actually, I almost want to say it's the first meter, right? So, and when you play in the first meter game, so at the very basic infrastructure level, what you need is a last meter that is so seamless, say, for example, payments, okay, that, I just met you, right, Yassin, and I live in Lisbon, you live here in Marrakesh, I have no idea, who you bank with, you have no idea who I bank with, you have no account in euros, I have no account in dirhams, and I can send you at an affordable price instantaneously 10 dirhams and you get it immediately. The only way to do this is through a blockchain today. To do this effectively, at an effective price. There is no yet maybe like Facebook claim that if we are both on Facebook, I could send you 10 dirham through Facebook, maybe, right? But that still would imply that you and I have the same wallet or a wallet on Facebook because it's not yet connected, right? So there is technology is not going to be the hard thing to do. Is a partnership on one side that will actually start connecting all this infrastructure, and then find the appropriate last mile. Could be WhatsApp, could be Facebook, could be, the Safari browser, you name it, right? Because this the interoperability is the challenge, but the interoperability has to do with the last meter, right? So because blockchain is a first meter app, or a first meter, let's say, concern, this is the difference between the two. And I'm not even sure that it is. I never thought about this ChatGPT moment for blockchain. Maybe, but it requires a very silent and almost Machiavellic way for a bunch of players to decide a common ground, right? Because there are a lot of players who are strong enough to get critical mass, but if it's not a common approach, you can maybe get together. I'm just making this up. There are maybe 2 billion people on Facebook today, right? Facebook could actually be a decent instant payments player for 2 billion people. But the other 5, or platforms who are overlapping would actually go against it, right? So this is the biggest challenge, to get this really broad and to have this epiphany and say, oh, wait, by the way, why don't we all focus on, the infrastructure should be the collaborative part, and then the last meter, in this case, it could be the competitive one, right? Yeah. Where, we give credits, or, we get microinsurance, or, a bunch of other accesses that today are just, not possible just yet.
The example that you gave, in that case, we would have to trust Facebook, which in the case of blockchain is not the case. And by definition, blockchain is trustless, which
exactly
makes the whole difference, right? Exactly. Who wants to rely on Facebook 100%, right?
Totally. Don't get started there.
Yeah. I would like to come back to an example that you gave and that I found very interesting, how things will become certainly decentralized in the future. You gave the example of education. In that case, I think that AI will also have a lot of impact. You gave the example of École 42, for instance, where there is a peer-to-peer system. And now with AI that is so advanced, where it's or it literally has access to all of the knowledge that was produced so far, it also now has conversational capabilities. People can now interact with it. They can educate themselves. It's in structure that is here 24/7, who's never tired. So I believe that will also lead to this way of decentralization. I mean, when I personally hear about decentralization, I often think about blockchain, but in that case, AI will also help the world become more decentralized, maybe.
Yeah, and maybe the word here, rather than being decentralized, it will be demultiplied. That's a more maybe accurate word to describe what might happen. Actually, I had a conversation with a good friend, Professor David Lee, from the Singapore universities, one of the largest blockchain investor, in the Asian market, and the guy that was talking about tokenizing and put the physical cows on the blockchain. Wow. In Africa, something like 6-7 years ago. So to see, it's another rebel, another crazy. But so Professor Lee was saying, listen, I am trying to work with a bunch of professors today to clone their their mind and their physical presence to be able to simultaneously train millions of students in different verticals. Oh. Okay, and AI will do a good 80% of it. Oh. Right? Because once you imagine there is something that is inside your head about AI. So you as a teacher, when you teach today, it's your human being trained by your, in my case, 54 years of life. Okay. Mm. And I teach what I know or what I learn. Mm. Right. But if I can train a machine to duplicate me, and you seem to have a relationship with a familiar face that teach you, AI for finance and AI for insurance and AI for credit and AI for identity, and is still the same person with some, of course, human touch, or but the idea is fascinating, right? So how you think of a hybrid version of education where AI can technically simulate 100 teachers looking exactly the same but teaching 100 different courses at the same time, accessible 24/7, nearly free. Imagine how fast. This is a ChatGPT moment for education. One day it will come, right? Because today you could argue that having access in some remote or where connectivity is a challenge, it is not as easy as be sitting in Paris and getting educated by a professor in Singapore, right? Soon this won't be a barrier anymore. So I'm looking for that epiphany moment as well.
I'm thinking also about the impact that it will have on, for instance, the African continent.
Absolutely. There is a reason why everyone is looking at Africa, and it's not only the fact that the average age is 19 years old, which is fascinating when you think about it, as well as some of the countries will be the most populated country in the planet. Think at Nigeria in 30 years from now, a bit more. I think is in 2100. Nigeria would be, if not the most populated at this rate, but among, say, the top 5 or whatever that is. But that means something, right? And if you combine it with the potential like climate change consequences, this guy might not be able to live all there anymore. And we might looking at displacing by necessity, and to have a very different approach on migratory flows. So it's fascinating to think how technology will help this. And it's something I actually think about it constantly. You know why? Because I have kids. And my kids are teenagers right now. And what I do think is that probably not themselves, but their kids already will live beyond 2100, so 2100, right? Their kids. So in 70 years from now, if I look at life when my parents were born and they're still there and they're 80 something, if life will progress the same way in the next 70 years, I don't think we're even close to think what can happen, right? And technology is one of the answers to that, especially in certain domains like education, food, climate change. Being able to imagine. I was in a panel a couple of weeks ago with a big boss of the insurances in Latin America, right? He was a CEO, and he was saying, "Listen, we were talking about climate change insurance products. And he was clearly saying that there are catastrophes that they are not insurable. So in the sense that there is no way we can cover, if today we have 30 times more often and 30 times more, let's say, how do you say it, with heavier consequences, natural disasters, only states can step in and cover, the premium if something like this happens. Private sector could not follow, right? So think of a way to be smarter in, forecasting this, at least to limit, for example, life losses, in some cases, or being smarter in a way you you capture, the potential consequences of these calamities and do something before they actually happen, right? So this is just one sector where there must be a tech answer, both in terms of finances, but also in terms of, claim treatments or like, how do you say it, forecasting, like damage forecasting, that even a marginal improvement could be of a massive benefit, for the way today we are, dealing with things that are completely impromptu and unexpected and, in a disastrous way sometimes, unfortunately.
It seems to me like you have mostly a positive view about AI and other emerging technologies. As you were speaking, for me, it seems like you view AI, for instance, as a solution rather than being the source of a problem. And the reason I'm talking about that is that now in the media, we can feel that there is a lot of worry about AI and how it can evolve in the future. And for obvious reasons, it could, of course, it's a powerful technology and it could be used for good reasons as well as bad reasons. I'm curious to know, what is your personal feeling about AI and the way it would evolve, considering that it would also evolve exponentially. So who knows where things will be in the following years?
Well, but isn't that the case for anything? I mean, probably when internet was born and they realized what it could do, or when Bitcoin was born and they realized what it could do, there is already an evil side to everything, right?
Same for nuclear power, exactly. Right?
So it's and it's not because I'm an inherent optimist, but it is simply because a technology like AI, the good they can bring to the world is so much more than a pernicious way of using it, that it would be dumb anyway to drop it because of that, right? So to me, the only way is forward with this. And of course, there will be collateral damages, there will be deep fakes, and there will be, another level of, frauds typically that are going to be inherent, to the democratization of this technology, as well as in some cases, I can see, students cheating with using AI and not learning anything, right? Because they just copy paste something that ChatGPT has given to them, and they don't even understand what they just copy pasted, right? But at the same time, when we think of scaling and the speed at which population is growing, the problems are growing, and also the necessity to reach, a bigger mass, with solutions in general. I mean, and I'm being generic on purpose, right? You cannot think traditionally, right? So, and both the technology and the way to, let's say, make a smart use of it will go at the same time, and I have faith in humanity, okay, fundamentally. So I'm not worried. Worry is not the word. I'm not concerned. I am paying attention, to what happens, and hopefully, the good that technology will bring in the world will be, the benefits will overcome the potential threats, right? And I think it is the case that I have faith in the self-regulated nature, of the human being, right? And hopefully, smart people will take smart decisions.
At the end, it's technology is an amplifier, so it comes up to the intentions of the people that use it. So good people will be able to do more good, and bad people will be able to do more bad, right?
Absolutely. But there are more good than bad people in the world, right?
That's true. Yeah. Matteo, talk to me about the 2 books that you have written. I have an admiration for books. And obviously, if I have an admiration for books, I also have admiration for people who produce books, so writers. And I always wonder, what is the spark that leads to the decision to commit to writing a book? In your case, what was the epiphany moment or the spark that have led you to write each one of the books that you have written? So the FinTech Revolution and Talents and Rebels.
So I published 2 books and started writing 2 more. Okay. And the first one was not an inspiration. It was a university who asked me to write the state of fintech in Italy. And that's how FinTech Revolution was born. And the angle there was we were trying to democratize, in Italy at least, the access to what fintech meant, right? There is even a very famous reel about me trying to explain fintech to my grandma and talking about her being able to not queuing 9 a.m. Like at the end of the month, at the post office, because that's how people, get the pension in my little village where I was born. But there's the fact, being in front of a TV, gather money into her phone and being able to spend it and, give it to their kids with the mobile payment, that how I explain fintech to my grandma, right? And so that was the first one. And it was part of the, let's say, technology series of books commissioned by the university. And then, curiously enough, I never studied English in my life. I only studied French. Oh. French is the only language that I've studied. And I learned the rest of them, on the street or because I lived in these countries. And English, I learned it in Amsterdam when I did my thesis there. And I got the inspiration to write Talent and Rebels because I realized that I was part of this InnoTribe, I want to say marketplace or brand that we co-created at Swift with a bunch of employees. And we were witnessing and accompanying the beginning of fintechs there and then, right? So 2009, we launched the first startup challenge, TransferWise, Wise back then was the winner, and then Revolut, and then a bunch of other, like a very, very early stage back then and today multi-unicorns startups, and so we literally, witnessed the very beginning of it. And when I left Swift in 2013, I was still convinced that, Swift could have invested in all these startups, even with a blind spray and pray type of philosophy, because we were making this contest, every year. And I would have said, listen, just put, $5,000 in each winner of each cohort and just wait, right? And I don't even know how many hundreds of millions this fund would be today, but certainly I got this intuition that back then it was the right thing to do, but I didn't manage to do it, right? Mm-hmm. And then 5 years forward, I realized that none of the guys that sort of started that very unique community within Swift were still working for the company. We all left. And we all left to cooler jobs, or at least as cool jobs as we had back there, because it was an amazing experience in a tribe. And the fact that, we all sort of find new careers, very different, but way closer, to what we believed or to our personalities or to our, way of thinking, made me think that maybe there was a common, character traits or personality thread, to all of us. And that's how I came out in this, there is this quote, from David Ogilvy, which is the father of communication and publicity. And so he said that the talent is most likely to be found in nonconformists, dissenters, and rebels. And that was in the 60s.
Oh.
He associated the name rebel to the name talent, right? So I went to actually, thanks to a friend of mine from my lands, working for an Italian publisher. And I said, listen, I have this idea for a book. I'm writing it in English. I don't even know why I could have written, but actually I think I learned from the Italian version of the first one, and everyone was asking me to translate it in English, because I said, okay, this time let me write it in English from the beginning. So it was the only book they published in English. It's a very known Italian publisher, and they wanted to experiment a non-Italian, series of books, and I think it was the first one. They translated in Italian, which is a bit of a paradox, because being Italian myself, so I saw my book translated, but I accepted it because it would have been like writing it another time, translating my own book from my own English to the Italian, to my Italian. So it was better like that. And then I started, it was literally a 6 months exercise. Did a bit of research, but then mainly combined my own personal story with what other rebels that I've encountered during my professional and personal life, and listen to their stories and try to find out what is in common and how dealing with misfits for corporates might be a way to, cope with disruption, or maybe limit it, or contain the potential collateral damage of an unknown disruption that might come or might not come. But certainly if it comes and you're not prepared, like Kodak, for example, the consequences for a business might be disastrous, right? And because at the end of the day with fintech is, disruption is, the name of the game, because it's literally trying to, break down every single, business of a traditional bank or insurance, and hitting with some, startup magic and do it cheaper, faster, and possibly better, right? So that's all what fintech is about, or at least at the beginning. Now it became a broad business, and everyone is collaborating, and and big bands are coming to cool shows and stuff like that. But being someone who tried to explain to a bank why they should have a presence in social media, and listening to the answer they gave me 15 years ago, I can tell you that they came a long way, So because I was there, I was making this, these conversations when I always been an intrapreneur, regardless where I worked, who I worked for. And at Swift, I created 3 companies.
Wow.
So InnoThrive is not a company, and is a third one, is more like a brand. But I also created 2 more. They weren't really companies, but let me explain you. So one was swiftcommunity.net, which was the Facebook for bankers. 2005. 2005, Facebook was barely in Europe. But I created Italians Online, which was a social network for Italian expatriates that went from 0 to 250,000, a 250,000 Italians in 90 countries. And when you look at the platform back then, it was Facebook, literally. So, from the status to the messaging, to the profiles, to the marketplace, so literally it was fake without even knowing that building a social network was a thing. And that was created in 2003. And inspired by that, I went to Swift saying, listen, you see this Italians Online? I want to create it for the bankers. And it's going to be called swiftcommunity.net. So Swift did that. And so we had a network of 20,000 bankers in I don't even know how many countries, because Swift back then only had a one-way website, no way to interact with it whatsoever. And Swift was claiming to be in a community, right? And like advancing community dialogue was the mantra of the company, and there was no platform to do it. So I created that. And then between that and InnoTribe, I created a platform called Mind Tagger, which was back then a way to tag competencies and skills of each employees of the company, and then building an interface to be able to say, listen, I need someone who speaks Chinese, knows about payments, and knows about standards, because I need to create a new team for a project, or because I need an advice and I don't know who to ask for. And in Swift, I changed 4 jobs in 13 years. So how was it possible to understand, even on the only 2,000 employees sample of Swift, because Swift wasn't a big company, but even these 2,000 people, how could you know the background of all of them, right? So what they did was a self-assessment tag cloud for each employee. There was a way for a peer validation. So if I know you're a blockchain expert and you put blockchain with 5 stars because you think you're a 5-star blockchain expert, and I validate your tag for blockchain, and there are 20 people in the company that validate that blockchain, I know you're an expert in blockchain, even without knowing you, right? So this Mind Tagger thing never became a company, but it was a product. It was a SharePoint, which was an intranet, Microsoft intranet product used by Swift back then. It was a SharePoint plugin. And when you think fast forward, think today of like 20, 30, 100,000 people companies, How do they, LinkedIn did something similar, if you remember, with skills. Do you remember that? I mean, LinkedIn a few years ago, you were able to state the skills, but there was no way to have a visual interface to find people with the right combination of skills in the way that you requested it. Because 5-star blockchain might be an absolute want, but then I may be optional on payments, or like 2 stars on payments will be enough, right? So that capillarity in searching the right combination of talents was a product that they brought into Swift as a company. I eventually spun it off, found someone who wanted to give some money, but then I didn't dedicate the right time, and the project went sort of, I want to say, lost in the, lost in the dark. But when you think of it, with AI today, how accurate would be a tag cloud on Yassin today, generated by AI, knowing what you already did? Pretty accurate, right? Today, absolutely. I'm pretty sure it would say blockchain, entrepreneur, real estate, podcasting, etc., right? Just without you even touching it. So I think that it was too early for a product like this, but with the flexibility and also the change of way of working, where people are not in the office anymore. So if I don't talk to you every day, I might never know that you also do a podcast, right? I might know that you as an entrepreneur, but not with your past. I might know you as your present, Yassin, right? Same thing. Imagine how powerful could be figure out in a snapshot not only what people are able to do today, but a snapshot of what they could do as well, built by AI with, in my case, my 30 years of professional careers. So I don't even know why I came talk to you about all this. But we were talking about.
We're initially talking about your book. We went to actually from the title "Talents and Rebels."
Exactly. So as you can see, there is always a way, and this is more than rebelliousness. This is lateral thinking.
Yeah.
So and I think that there is no better description of it. So I saw that. In a company, in a 2,000 people company, my current job back then could be described by 10 tags, right? But my 15 years of career before could have added, another 20 tags of expertise that nobody was capturing and nobody could even know, right? So that was, the lateral thing that brought me to generate a new business inside the company. Nobody asked me for it. Nobody did pay me for it. Actually, it was on my free time or was on a whatever. And I actually brought into the adventure a bunch of people inside Swift that got sold by the idea, and then nothing happened. But that's the way you generate ideas and fail, right? So thinking laterally is inherent to be a rebel, I think.
Absolutely. Earlier, I asked you a question about if rebellion, the spirit of rebellion, is mandatory to be an innovator. And as you were talking and explaining your experience with Swift, I'm thinking that maybe it's not mandatory if you're working within the perimeter of a big company, like for instance Swift. In that case, talent would be enough because you can innovate. But as a standalone entrepreneur working on a disruptive idea that maybe wasn't launched before, in that case, the spirit of rebellion and going against the crowd is important.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Even if the limit between innovators and rebels is very thin, right? Because somehow, by definition, okay. You could argue that incremental innovation is very much inherent to any company, right? You always want to do a little bit better what you do already.
And you adapt to what's being done by other companies, right?
And you adapt. But what I call disruptive innovation or radical innovation, for that, you need to be rebellious a bit. And the reason is very simple, is that, first of all, things can go really wrong. And someone will take the blame, and the biggest is a corporate, the biggest is the blame. And, in large corporation, big blame, what that means, that your boss is going to, consider you the fuse to eliminate so that the problem is eliminated. And that's a risk you need to be able to take. And also because, radical innovation means have this spirit to adapt whatever idea and to reiterate until you find the right version of it, right? And coping with failure is never easy. And it's not about, being proud or wanting to be right in the first place, but it's simply this maybe humbleness of, saying yourself it's okay, not to get everything right, in the first place, and to consider the failure like the next step, or to consider failure as a reiteration, which is not only a nice marketing formula, but it's also the harsh truth of an entrepreneur, right? At the end.
Yeah. And also not having the approval of your surrounding and people.
Absolutely.
Coming back to the subject of writing books, I'm always impressed by the power of storytelling and how that can shape, for instance, how things evolve and so on. When we see the biggest movement that happened in the last decades and even centuries, we always see that there is a storytelling embedded within the movements. And often there is also a book that was written initially. What place do you think storytelling will play in the future in regards to the emerging technologies that we've been talking about, like AI and blockchain?
So I think that the way to deliver content in a fast, consumable way, we were talking about, hey, what's the first reaction? Let's produce a couple of reels, to this podcast so we can shoot it on social. Because today, anything, has the right format for the right consumption, and so that's one example of adapting yourself to the way that the crowd will consume it, right? And storytelling, I think, is super important, simply because it is a sad truth, but you need consensus, and very often the best approach is to get the two sides of the market, and if you want to get the two sides of the market, you need to understand the consumers, also to understand the guys who makes the product, right? So, and you know what? I'm going to give you a concrete example. Since the storytelling is the no longer than a couple of hours ago when we were driving here, I was explaining you this need for nurturing entrepreneurs in Africa after they participated to all these cohorts and startup challenges and accelerators and incubators and you name it. And there's a plethora of them in Africa, and they are all very good exercises. Truth being told, once for certain startups for sure, but unfortunately, a national sport for some of these startups is just moving from one cohort to another. So they have a temporary house, they have some cash, and the mentorship required to actually go to the true next level is what is missing. One, because it requires expertise. Second, requires time. And also very often is not a proven business model, right? So you often rely to, the goodness of the heart of that mentor, or like, I might be mentoring your startup after this meeting because you spent an hour and a half in talking to me. You particularly like the way I approach the business. You will ask me that. I like your business model. But not every entrepreneur has the opportunity to get so close to the potential mentor to truly understand what this person could bring, right? So what I did is that I spoke with 4 or 5 big brands that today are running accelerators, and I will not name them because, for obvious reasons, but I detected immediately they all have the same problem, right? And then I created a couple of years ago this entity called Time Pledge, and the name is self-explanatory, to pledge some of my network's time back to African entrepreneurs to help them with soft skills improvement, right? So listening to these needs on one side and observing, the gap in the market and making the fil rouge with an idea that was almost born for that purpose, but not quite adapted yet because the problem wasn't stated the same way, right? So 4 years ago, probably there were a third of the cohorts that, today are present in Africa. And, the problem maybe was still there back then, but because of COVID, because of a bunch of external, good reasons, they weren't even aware that that would become a problem. But now the problem is there. So what does it take, or what is the right approach to take the problem, take a bunch of resources and bunch of players, building a business model on the top of it, and actually make something that is nothing else than using existing resources, right? But towards the resolution of a problem, right? The way to do this is storytelling. So I build a story in my mind and I replicate the story to every single one of the players that I believe could be the right main characters, of this film, that I have in mind. And the story actually resonated, Now, maybe next year I'll come back and tell you, remember that story, about Time Pledge? Well, now it became a thing, and these are the players, and this is how many startups, we have helped, and this is the network of whatever. Maybe not, right? But at the basis, it's this storytelling exercise is that touches all the points from the problem we are trying to solve, a clear way to expose the solution, who are the main players, what's the magic, what is the ask, all this. It seems a lot like a sales pitch, but the story is way more important than the sales pitch.
Absolutely.
Because it's what it will resonate, right? Then if also because the guy or the person you're talking with is really the one who actually physically signed the check that you're requesting for, because at the end of the day it's a matter of, fundraising or giving this idea some wings, right? And wings means financing or resources. So, but this person is the one who will convey the message. And the instrument you're giving to this person is your storytelling, so she can replicate it, So I think that's a pretty, to me, is a super clear example of the importance of it, because literally this project is starting with the storytelling. Mm-hmm. So it's I'm using it as often as I can, to be able to explain what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, so storytelling in that case is what brings people together, right? And also gives them the ability to find meaning behind what they're doing. And also like that, as you were explaining, it seems like it's also a style of leadership and a very powerful one. Because then people, once they understand what's the story behind it, they can start acting with the story without having to micromanage them and so on, once they understand basically.
Absolutely.
The essence of it.
I personally, I hate micromanagement, and I'm very bad in managing people. Very, very bad. Because I'm not interested, I'm not interested in giving orders. I prefer to lead by example. And if I can, to empower people to help if they want and if they understand, and I want to work with people that thinks that the company is theirs, which is the way I work. In every single company I worked for, I imagined that company was mine. So in the way I manage the resources, think about new projects, think about new products, improving existing whatever. So that's the mindset of the people I want to work with. Therefore, soldiers I'm not good in managing armies, which is also the reason why I'm not working for a large corporation. So that, everything has a logic.
Matteo, you've talked to me about your role as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, but you're also an investor. I'm also curious to know a bit more about your experience as an investor, and particularly what are the traits that you're looking for in entrepreneurs that you're engaging with. Especially, I'm curious to know about entrepreneurs that are first-time founders who do not have necessarily the track record, who do not have credibility. What traits, specific traits, are you looking for when you decide to work with specific entrepreneurs?
So right now, I am an angel investor on a few projects, with my own money. And then I collaborate with a bunch of funds that I've been working with for the past, almost 15 years. And they're all good friends, and there is this trusted relationship. So I would bring investors that I know are adapted to that specific startup profile, right? But I would like to answer to the tail of the question. You just asked about, how do I judge is not the word, but how do I help? How do I invest? How do I bet? Okay, in first-time entrepreneurs. Well, I would like to say that, I would dare to say that it's 50% science and 50% art, right? So the 50% scientist in a first-time entrepreneur is, her drive, the homework, how scrupulous, she has been in getting the data together, how objective she has been in understanding, the competitors and what is the angle, and did she size the market. So it seems pretty basic, but having coached, I want to say 2,000 entrepreneurs or first-time entrepreneurs, or even 0 times entrepreneurs, so wannabe entrepreneurs. For a lot of them, even if most of this info is available online and with a very thought-through homework, they could have come with a very different preparation from the outset. They don't do this, because I also have a lazy teenager that I am educating to, do his homework, and not, asking dad, how to do this because it's easier, but, doing the homework first and then ask when he doesn't know, right? And that's human. I'm not blaming anyone, and I'm certainly not blaming my son, but this is, easy is not what makes a good entrepreneur. Easiness of life, by definition, right? Otherwise, you better go and work for, the central bank, or like a big industry, and be a number if you want to.
Go with the flow.
Exactly, and go with the flow. So, and that's the science part, okay? The art part is her heart, the drive, the hungry she has, how, and her story, or what motivates her in choosing that specific venture, or in choosing her, why to become an entrepreneur. So, and in Africa, this second aspect plays a very important role, because there are a lot of, desperate entrepreneurs, right? So entrepreneurs who turn entrepreneurs because they have no other choice, and they realize that maybe, teaming up with a bunch of guys and try to develop a small consultancies, which in their eyes is a startup, and maybe it's a great idea, but it's not investable, right? And that's again because they don't do the homework. Because if they did, they wouldn't come to a VC meeting hoping to raise money from a VC with a consultancy startup. Just to give a concrete example of something that already happened a few times. So with this 50% science, 50% heart is how I personally judge a first-time entrepreneur, or an entrepreneur who is just starting her journey. And I can't really explain the 50% heart. I think is a mix of empathy, experience,
intuition,
connection, intuition, and sometimes you're wrong, and so far I've been more right than wrong, but I've been wrong, especially, we were talking this morning with these guys from 01 Edu who I loved, and we didn't have any deals, so I don't even know why I'm doing them free publicity, but I really like the guys, right? And they were saying here in Africa, 98% of our cohorts, by the way, starting from very different background, including farmer, policeman, and non-computer science programmer at all. They do this like initial selection, then they start this 2-year program, and 98% they actually come out, as a programmer. The one who doesn't, there are 2-3% failure, is for personal reasons. Now, personal reasons in Africa has a very different connotation than personal reasons in other parts of the world. Because here you have a lot of stories that for many Europeans, you only look at in Netflix movies, but here they're real. And I've been fortunate and also a sad witness of a lot of complicated and harsh stories of entrepreneurs that has, psychological issues or very hard family, histories, and this affects your company and your drive, and it can affect it in two very different ways. It makes you quit or it makes you very strong. And probably this is the sparkle that maybe I'm looking for, and not the sparkle that comes from trouble, right? Or not only that, but that sparkle that make that entrepreneur persistent, because persistency at the end is what makes an entrepreneur constantly moving forward, right? And learning from mistakes. Persistency is the number one quality of an entrepreneur to me. Persistency, and it's a quality that part of it you have it in yourself, but part of it you can learn, right? And that's the part of intuition and the part that I cannot quantify. And I think it's fair enough, right? Because when you talk with someone who, maybe knows, maybe as little as you do, on their own personal life, because they don't know, right? They might end up in 10 years really working for, a telco or a bank. But right now they want to be an entrepreneur because they have this idea, right? And I think it's only fair to let them do it. The difference is you can be the coach, you can be the coach and an investor, you can be the coach and an investor and a constant advisor and working for them and even act as a co-founder, I think that out of the goodness of your heart, you have to try to, accompany this entrepreneur in whatever phase of the journey they are in. And then it's up to you and this intuition side to see how far you want to go.
This is also the part that you cannot outsource to AI, right?
Absolutely.
It's this human touch.
Absolutely.
When we talk about analytics and how good the startup is doing, how the market is doing, this is, for instance, something that AI can do easily, but this intuition and gut feeling that you mentioned, this is also where humans bring value, right?
Absolutely.
When you talk about persistence and the importance of persistence of entrepreneurs, it actually reminded me of a quote or a saying that I like a lot, the fact that entrepreneurship is like a marathon. It's not like a sprint. It's something that you do on the long run. I'm also curious to know personally, how are you able to keep yourself on the edge in an ever-changing world? Are there some habits in particular that you engage in that allow you, to keep going on the long run and also to keep going, to keep the persistence and keep going on in this marathon of entrepreneurship?
So personally, it's been like a few years, I want to say 5 or 6 years, that meditation and find quiet time for myself, especially when you have a very turbulent mind with a lot of ideas at the same time, when you don't have a single job. Very often you need to assess whether where you need to focus, to a point that sometimes it still happens, but it's very rare. When you get awake at night and the only way to go back to sleep is to write down everything that is in your head, because you're actually waking up because you're afraid that some of it will escape, right? And so in order not to have this type of not quiet nights, I learned how to find time for myself. And so that's the first. It's a routine, but it is something that, concretely speaking, I found it helpful. Second, I learned how to say no. super important. Is as important as learning how to say yes. And I say no to like people who are, only asking and never giving, for example, which is a common thing to do. I'm not blaming them, but sometimes it's just the case, right? And maybe when you're younger, you don't realize that so much, but growing up you do. And so I learned to say no. Second, and maybe the third thing is a profound realization that there is a time to race and there is a time to observe, and you need to rightly balance the two. Especially when you are, when you have a portfolio of activities, which is my case, for example. And so what I try to do is, you cannot only think long term, but if you only firefights, or if you're only like too much focus on making one thing work, because in that moment is the most important, you might lose the middle or the long-term view, right? So, and I think that a bit by coincidence, and then slowly in a conscious way, I also, I work on short, middle, and long-term stuff, right? And the long-term is what, we don't have the same age, right? But, when you're getting, I'm closer to retirement, that I'm closer to my, like a peak of professional life, right? And the notion of retirement is nothing even close to what it could be for my dad, who is, retired for 25 years right now. And, he has a peaceful life in his little village with my mom, playing cards every day, doing grocery shopping, cooking, looking at the grandchildren. This is the type of person that my father at my age was dreaming for, right? The third time of my life that I'm dreaming for is a full giving back, life, using the skills that I've been fortunate enough to receive and propagate them, right? So also the way of, what are the tools? So the tools is to think that there is not a beginning and an end of your professional life. There is I learned how to blend my personal and professional life, reunited by this, I want to say, consciousness, of mindfulness, of doing stuff with impact, whatever impact that means, right? But this is the main driver, right? And so this is maybe the third thing, is that when impact is your first criteria on whatever you do, money comes, of course, but somehow I have this very weird relationship with money, because I came from a very modest, hyper modest family. So I can live with very little if I want to. And that's a super strength, because, when you pass by hunger, passing by hunger in an Italian village means eat a lot of pasta. I'm not saying hunger that was nothing to put on a plate, right? But, for my teenager standard, was certainly not the same that what I was seeing in many other families, right? We ate a lot of pasta when I was a teenager, and my kids are certainly not eating pasta every day at all, Good for them. But this reminiscence of being hungry and at the same time being able to live with little, I think that is an incredible strength. And this is linked to what I do believe is the fundamental, common fil rouge that I want to give to everything I do, right? Because when between having a Porsche or an Audi or a Toyota doesn't really change anything in your life, and literally it doesn't change anything in my life as long as the car doesn't break and brings me to whatever I want to be, your perspective of what really matters in life change a lot.
Oh, Matteo, thank you very much for what you've shared. Thank you as well for joining me today for the podcast. I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to meet you and that I had the opportunity to record this podcast with you today. And I'm looking forward to seeing you very soon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And actually, I have to congratulate you because, first of all, it's not easy to make me speak for an hour and a half. So thank you. And also, the older you get, the more it's complicated to get personal. And I think you have a good heart, and your way to spread good stories comes from a very good intention, and I can feel it. So that is the reason why it was also very natural to open up. So I'm also very grateful for this interview. Thank you.
Thank you very much.